This is Today's Business Leaders. Actionable advice from real-world professionals. And now here's your host, Gabe Arnold.
All right, today I'm excited to have Jay Crouch on the show. He was introduced by another awesome guest, Vlad, and so he's going to share with us today his entrepreneurial journey, as well as talk a little bit about a project that he's working on, a new book. So welcome to the show, Jay.
Hi, nice to meet everybody.
Exactly, yeah. What I always like to do on the show on Today's Business Leaders here is just have people kind of give us a little bit of a background about how you became an entrepreneur. So to start, tell us when you first realized you were an entrepreneur, and then kind of give us the brief history of how that started and getting us to today.
Sure. Yeah. So that's a great question. I've never been asked that before, and I would say I didn't realize that I was an entrepreneur until I had started like my fourth company. So
that's a little late.
Yeah. I mean, early on, when I was in school, I was going to be a physics guy, and there was this quintessential day where. Actually, the same day it happened, I got an award for like outstanding physicist of the year, and then they had a career counselor come in, and the career counselor was like, "Well, so here's the deal: you can't get a job as a physicist anymore. So you need to take some computer science classes because you'll probably do that." And then like 3 hours later, I was like, "Well, screw this! I'm just gonna go. If that's what I'm gonna do for a job, then I should go learn how to do that right." So I switched into computer science, and then from there I graduated into like the .com bubble burst. So I was forced into being an entrepreneur. So it was just sort of like scrapping and working with a bunch of small companies, and then shortly thereafter I was brought in as like a junior CTO, director technology type of person for my first true proper startup. And then from there, it was just kind of like startup after startup after startup, where I was the technical founder. And then to your question, I think towards my fourth, or I think it's probably the fourth company. At that point, I was now president, running 45 people and cross domain, and I was like, oh okay.
I guess I'm an entrepreneur.
Ended up, yeah. Yep.
That's cool.
Yep.
Nice. And what I built and sold my first website when I was 16, and that's kind of how I got into tech and marketing. So it's similar, at least in some senses. How technical did you get with like your schooling, and you were involved in these early 4 startups? Like, did you get to the level of coding, or are you just the strategist?
Oh yeah, definitely. Hands-on coder. I was, my degree in college was computer science. I started there, but I actually realized very quickly that I think that there's just so much more influence and impact that you can create with the people and the products, right? Because especially as my career has evolved, I've started to realize that the product matters so much more than the technology. Because if you're not building the right thing, then it doesn't matter what you're building, right, or how well you're building it. Like it's not creating value. So I think that's like the top of the pier for me, and then the second tier down would be the people, right? Because if you don't have everyone working effectively, again, it doesn't matter if the code is quality, you're wasting a bunch of time. So Over the years, I've like, this is odd to say from a CTO, but I've grown a disdain towards the technology, because I'm like, there's actually a lot of people out there that can write good tech. It's just getting everybody focused and aligned first.
You said something really interesting, which I think that people don't think about, and obviously over the years you realize this, like you said, but you said the technology doesn't matter as much as the product, and I think that sometimes people think it's the same thing. So expound upon that more, because I know where you're going with, but I think that would make sense to share a little bit more about that.
Absolutely. So actually, let me share a story of how I ended up doing what I'm doing now, which is we can talk about later. And it's also the reason that I wrote the book. So it's kind of the genesis of everything. And so
Perfect.
At the time, this was about 2 years ago, and I was working at Honest Company, which is Jessica Alba's company. It's like a $2 billion unicorn startup that everybody wants to work at. And I was there. It was honestly just like, what is the saying? Like, happy as a pig in blanket or something like that. I mean, I was super happy. And I spoke at a panel here in LA at our largest like entrepreneurial community. We call it Silicon Beach Fest, right? Homage to Silicon Valley. And so I'm there and I do a panel, and this entrepreneur comes up to me and he's like, "Hey man, loved what you had to say. Frankly, I don't even know what the panel was about." And then he was like, "I want you to audit my MVP when I'm done with it." And I'm like, "Okay, sure." And it's exactly what you just said, because in his mind, he wanted me to do a technical audit to see if the code that was written was written properly.
Yeah.
And so honestly, I completely forget about this guy because he ghosts, right? And then 9 months later, he shows up and he is giving me, he's giving me the whole spiel of everything he's built. And honestly, it looks beautiful, right? Really, he worked with the dev firm to get it done, and it looks great. But I was struck by this feeling of like horror, right? And I'm probably like 3 minutes in. And the reason was that, I'll make this really tangible. I won't worry the details, but here's the problem. So he hired the dev firm, $88,000, right? 9 months of his time.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm looking at it, and his app is, think of it as like a media sharing app, right? So it's a native mobile app. It's kind of like Spotify, but it's not something you're going to use every day, right? Like the media that you're sharing is online, so it's also not like Instagram. You don't have to use your phone. Point is, there's nothing in any of his app that allows a user to share his media with someone outside of the app. It's all in app, right? And so I'm like, pause for 1 second. Let's look at user acquisition, right? If you're just a general dude and you get a link to go check out a web page or a link to go download an app, which are you more likely to do? Basic answer is like statistically you're 100 times more likely to go check out a web page than you are an app, because there's no risk to you as a consumer, right?
Just viewing, yep.
No problem. Okay, so he gets this, and I'm like, so now how are you going to keep people using your app if they only use it once a month, and how are you going to get new people to come in and join your app if you don't have any way of engaging someone who doesn't have an app? So light bulb goes off, and then he's like, oh, okay, so I need to do that. And so then we start looking at it, and I'm like, you don't need a mobile app. The mobile app is a power user tool that you're going to build in like 3 years, but you need to focus on getting user acquisition. And now we're back into like all the metrics that investors are going to care about, and the metrics that I would typically drive as a CTO or technical founder, whatever, right? And I'm like, what is the end solution? It ends up being $2,000, right? I'm like, here's a guy I know. He's a web developer. You don't need huge. This is super cheap, right? Right. Takes him a month, and he spent 88.9. It's insane, right?
Oh my gosh!
And so when I told this story to people before, when I shared it, some people kind of get snobby, and they're like, "Oh, he's a dumb founder," and I'm like, "No,
he's normal not a founder."
Right? So this happened about a year and a half ago now when he came back. And so my journey since then has been outside of ventures, because I've been, when we went through my history, I was a founder of multiple companies. And then now I'm working on the outside as more of an advisor. And so I'm looking at the whole ecosystem, and here's what shocked me. I've realized that as a whole, everyone who can build software makes money building software, right? Yeah. And it's so basic. I mean, it's the same in like other things like marketing or whatever. Like everybody makes money by working, but when it comes to tech, it's extremely dangerous, because as a non-technical person, you have no way of managing that process because you can't inspect it. Right? Like so many founders and so many CEOs of large organizations, and I'll come back to Honest in a moment, but so many of these leaders think that they can manage software like they manage everything else. And I totally empathize, because I've managed marketing, I've managed, operations, etc. Like I get that mindset. And that mindset is like, look, I'm gonna take a little bit of a chance on somebody that I trust. If they reward well, I'll go deeper. Right. And then if things go wrong, I'll just hire somebody new. But in technology, there's like several facets that make all of that super dangerous. And that's why like literally 9 in 10 companies are wasting massive amounts of money on tech. And I don't know if you want to jump into the question. I like to keep going here, but
no, this is good. You're good, and I have a couple examples I'll probably drop into because you're touching on something super important.
it is, right. I mean, this is like I didn't want to like lead the call off, but like literally, I think this is the most important thing
I would
you
agree.
could possibly listen to today.
Yeah,
Right?
I would agree.
A couple of the issues. So like, let's go through the different vendors and the alignment that they have, right? So, um, a lot of people want to do it DIY. This is your like really early bootstrap founder, and they're like, look, I just want to hire a couple engineers, and I just want to control them, right? And that works a lot of the time. But where it doesn't work in tech is because again, you can't inspect that code. That's aspect number one. And so what ends up happening is the engineer that you've hired inevitably faces decisions of like, hey, how, do I skip the test right now, or do I not skip the test right now? And it's kind of this ambiguous question. And on one hand, it might benefit the business long term, or maybe it benefits the business short term. But in every case, if he takes a shortcut, it benefits him, and that's the key. Because now the code is deviated from best practice. It's deviated from something that somebody else could work on. It's a shortcut he took, and he's the only person that understands it, and this creates a lock-in. And so now you have all these founders and CEOs that go along for like years, and then they think that if things get bad, or they realize that their metrics start to ping, they go, oh, okay, I'll go get a new firm. And what happens inevitably every single time that a CEO tries to go to a new firm or a new dev or a new CTO, they go, I can't work with this. I got to start over.
Exactly.
Right? And that is just damaging. It's just so incredibly terrible.
Yeah.
And then like we talked about in the first story, and this applies across the board, but then that focus on product. And this is a huge issue because the most widely accepted doctrine or methodology for building software is build less. Right? Just constantly build less. And this came out of Eric Ries's book, which is The Lean Startup. And a lot of people probably listening to this haven't heard of it, but a lot of people will have, and it's most people should have heard of it. It's like the way to build software. Here's the problem: that whole process is predicated on building less, but dev firms don't make money.
I'm doing less. Yeah.
Right? And developers don't create job security if they're constantly recommending building less, and CTOs don't get to build
don't get to stay on longer for building less.
Exactly. There's literally and this goes back to the question, right? No one that builds technology is financially motivated to build less, but that's the only way to build a company. So there's a problem. And then on that's the kind of the product, a lot of people talk about product and they think about like UI or UX and like toggling the buttons to optimize for engagement or, all these like terms. And this is all, it's all great. And it's all a requirement and core competency of a team. And there's wonderful product managers that I have worked with, but it's a product manager function. It's not strategic product. And that's how do I not build shit? Right. Yeah. Sorry for may have to edit that.
No, you're good. You're fine. It's totally fine.
So that's piece one, and then on the same kind of concept applies to CTOs as well, or leaders, right? Again, a lot of early stage startups will say, I want my technical founder, or I want my VP of engineering, I want my CTO that codes, and there's lots of different names for it, but to them they're looking for this all-in-one unicorn person who's going to lead, who's going to talk to investors, who's going to build the team, who's going to write the code. And my message to everyone on that is like, who are you kidding, right? Like, yeah. First of all, the only person who's going to join your company at a very early stage before you have traction, unless you are a decorated founder who just came off of some big exit, right? You don't matter yet. Your idea is wonderful, and the entrepreneur is, all I do is startups, so I love it, right? But you don't have a position of strength. So you're asking someone you're describing someone who literally has 20 years of experience, right, to be able to do all of these different functions. And then even when you hire them, there's no way that person can be effective because the schedule alone to manage is completely different than the schedule for coding. And coding, you want to be like,
zoned in, yep, gone.
You don't get talking to anybody else, right? And then you deal with like conflict resolution, expectation management, risk management, all these things. Like,
and then investors.
And anyway, it's silly. It's just, so I'm like, look, I totally agree. It's super worthwhile to have somebody on your team that is best with equity, that's burning the midnight oils, but treat them as what they are, the coder, right? Get yourself a coder. Make this a much easier thing that you can go hire for, because you go get someone with like 3 to 7 years experience, depending on your funding, who's like bummed out, at
that Google didn't hire him.
Yeah. And so then you just code, and then take all of the senior experience that you're looking for, what product, the stuff we're talking about here, right? And get yourself someone who knows what they're doing on a very small fractional basis. And then that kind of takes me to the next piece, which is the experienced CTOs. And they're also misaligned, because as a consultant, right, if you're coming in as a consultant, then it's difficult to work on a lot of projects. And so most consultants, whether it's tech or whether it's marketing or whatever, they're looking for like a retainer, bare minimum around $5K a month. Most of the time, if you're talking about a really senior CTO like me, it's like $10K or plus, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're a startup, you're like, well, I can't get that. Right? That's impossible.
Blows all your seed money.
Yeah, exactly. It's gone. Right? So you don't want that. And it makes sense, because you also, what does a senior CTO do? They manage stuff for you, and you don't want that. As a startup, there's no room for it, even if you could afford it. So what do you really want? You want an advisor. You want an advisor that is going to help you manage your own process and your own team and your own technology, and show you how to build your own, the levers that you need to manage this process, and come in and do inspections and basically be your eyes and ears, right? And so that's the message of my book. Everything we just talked about, I'm building my practice on this. I'm building the book off it. It's all about how do you create alignment around yourself, right? Because the dev firm is not there's nothing wrong with the dev firm. They want to make,
and they
right?
should, yep.
And they create a value, right? I mean, a lot of founders are like, most founders want to save money, so most founders should not be working with a dev firm. They should do the logistics themselves. Yeah. But for those founders that are like, look, I'm busy, I'm doing another business, I want to create this other business on the side, I want things simple, work with a dev firm, right? That's the value they create. They're going to charge 50 to 100% markup, but that's the value they create. So it makes sense. They're not bad people. You just have to be able to manage them. And if you don't, then you're going to end up like the guy that I talked about originally, who's a great guy, current client, and amazing. But like that story is not rare, as I'm sure you'll say. Like, this is everyone, right? So that's the key. You want the advisor, and then the last piece in my rant is how do you get the advisor? And well, there's a lot of misconceptions about that, because most people, when they think of advisors in general, it's like, oh, well, it's like my marketing advisor or my strategic advisor that's going to help me connect the network. And so they're expecting advisors to work for free, right, or equity, and then they're expecting them to be super, super like decorated. They want them to come out of like honest, right, or bigger companies.
Something huge.
I'm like, that's not the kind of advisor I'm talking about, because again, it's like a supply or demand thing. Like, experienced technologists are in demand. God bless you if you can find somebody who's going to pay attention, and constantly pay attention and really help you. And by all means, go do that. But in reality, going back to the first part of the conversation, there's 3 aspects to tech, right? There's the product side. Right. And most CTOs have no product experience whatsoever. That's a huge, huge misconception. They have absolutely no idea how to do product. Then the second piece is team, which means how do we go find the right people that are going to be the most cost effective for you? And again, that person has to be tapped into you if you're early stage or late stage. They have to know what you're about. And so they're probably not the best coder in the world, right? So they've moved away from that. Then you have to have somebody who's a really good coder, who's watching and over the weekly basis doing code reviews and making sure that you're not going off the rails. So I just described 3 functions that could probably be 3 different people.
Yeah.
And so what I'm basically saying is, if you want to build a company, you need to go pay tactical coaches or advisors or whatever you want to call them to help you with all 3 of these things. And then you have to be respectful of the fact that no one like me wants to come in and help you and fight for retaining that client relationship on a month-to-month basis.
Right.
So you're going to have to, I'm like, and this is the way my practice is built, and I encourage anyone else to, if you don't want to work with me, cool, I don't care, like work with somebody, but do it in a way where, like, if you want to work with me, it's either going to be like a year commitment, or it's going to be kind of like almost like a recruiter where I'm going to replace myself by showing you who to hire. Team building stuff. I'll make a little bit off of each of them, but I'm going to set you up for success. I'm totally cool working for, a couple $100 a month. That's not the issue. That's all the help you need as a CEO. But, in order to make this whole relationship worthwhile, it's going to have to be like a year or something, right? Because otherwise there's just not enough money in it.
Right.
And there you go, right? So you can hire people like me. You can get 3 if you want. You can hire someone like me and it gets other people, whatever. But the point is, you need someone senior in all 3 disciplines. Don't be spending a whole bunch of money. Don't expect someone free to do everything for you and stay focused.
Yeah.
Don't think you can do it yourself. Like there you go. There's the rant.
Oh, I love it, and I'm glad you're writing the book about it because nobody understands it and nobody talks about it if they do understand it. So, because I'll give the quick few war stories just to kind of give people some other examples too. One is with one of my products that's like our biggest product today is Copywriter Today. And it's not necessarily like a technical startup. It's not an app or something like that. But I came up with the idea of, hey, everybody else charges per word, and it's really hard to find good writers, and getting copy consistently is difficult. So I'm like, I know this is a problem because I was building a lot of websites back then. I don't do so much of that anymore. But I build these websites for people with our team, and then we go back in 2 days, 2 months, 2 years later, the blog is empty. There's no content. It's like they're not even leveraging what we built.
Right.
And the answers are I hate writing or I don't have time to write. So like those are the 2 things. So I'm like, well, here seems a problem. I think I can create a solution. So I literally launched the product with a Wufoo form and a password protected page. And now it's like, and now we have almost 200 customers. So it's growing, and it's 4 years later, and we work with a bunch of agencies, and it's great. And now we have like a real backend and a bunch of it's like that. But it was really ugly in the beginning, but it solved the problem.
Groupon launched the same way. They were literally a Wufoo form, right? Multi-billion-dollar company.
Right. So it's like people, I just share that because people think like, unfortunately, your friend, like if I spend $80,000, then I'll have something great. Unfortunately, that may or may not solve the problem. And like you said, he spent $2,000 and had the problem, had his solution done. So money is not the answer. It's the solution is the answer. I don't know, and I've seen people, and I'm a huge proponent of the lean methodology or lean kind of thought process. But what you shared is way more insightful in that, because of course, if you start to try to outsource and bring pieces in, there's no motivation to be lean.
Exactly.
Ever.
Exactly.
Unless you're the founder and it's your money or your investors that you're trying to manage. It's like, so I've seen people, I had one guy who didn't validate the ideas, didn't do what I told him to do, like the whole process. And I'm like, this is going to continue to be expensive. And he put $175,000 in the thing, and it never launched.
Right.
It's like,
well, this is like 9 and 10, and that's where the dev firms clean up, because they know the statistics that are 9 and 10. So like, we'll just take the founder for $150K and walk, right? Because they're never going to go. And I'm like, it just drives me nuts.
Yeah.
And then I think that there's also to take it into the larger realm besides just like early stage startups. So as I mentioned, I worked at Honest, and so here we go. We've got a team of, I think at one point we had 70 technologists, engineers, QA, all the rest, and that's a big team. We're building multi-million-dollar projects. I mean, like, what is that? Eight figure, type of projects, and so this is, I think most people come into this thinking that a company like that would have their crap together, right? Or that all the other companies, Snapchat, Facebook, whatever, they have their crap together. They don't.
It's a mess everywhere.
It's a total mess. And it's the same issues all over again, right? Because what happens, well, at the early on in Honest days, we were the first subscription e-commerce company. It was like truly that we were defining that model. And so there, like Shopify, which is really popular now, to get an e-commerce store going didn't really have the subscription capabilities.
Mm-hmm.
Still doesn't, right? But so we had this decision to make. I wasn't there at the time, and the decision was: do we roll our own e-commerce solution so we can do subscriptions, or do we just like leverage off of Shopify and create our own? Well,
of course they built their own,
this goes, right?
Which was the wrong decision, probably.
Right, and so then and by the way, today now there's a whole bunch of like subscription vendors that are decorated add-ons that you can buy into Shopify.
Right.
But we're spending tens of millions of dollars, and we're integrating in with all of our back-end ERP systems and all of this other crap. And then and why? Well, at the end of the day, I think the CTO that made that decision was not the one that I worked with, but he benefited from being the star of the show,
and
the job security behind it, all of it, right? And so, and then like the CTO that I worked for, different problem, same issue. He wanted to be CTO. He really was. He is someone I would work with any day of the week. I just had lunch with him. I would recommend to everyone, and his skills have grown past what I'm about to talk about. But like, at the time, he struggled with indirect management, right? So he was an earlier stage leader, and so he was like he didn't understand the nuances of upward mobility.
Mm-hmm.
So all of a sudden we've got a team of 70 people. He can't manage 70 people himself, so he's got 5 leads that are managing everybody else, and all of those guys want to be the CTO one day. But he's not setting their expectations for how do you get there, which one of you are going to have to like exit the company to get where you want to go, like all of that training, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he just kind of like doesn't address the issue. What do? They all want to build their own fiefdoms. And so then all of a sudden we're building a whole bunch of technology that we don't need again, right? So it's like
same problem, different problem, thing, yeah.
Right? SSDD. It's just constant, and so that this is what I'm trying to like shout to the world is stop being
idiotic about everything. Yeah,
exactly. Get yourself an advisor. Get people that can be hands-on. I don't care if you're a multi-billion-dollar company. Get people that are able to come in and peer in and just identify the issues. Right, that CTO I just talked about, he didn't understand the depth of the magnitude of the issue of indirect management. To him, it was a blind spot, right? We all have blind spots, but like an advisor would have been able to spot that immediately,
right?
And coach him through it. You get to retain your wonderful talent that's trying to build a thing, right? That's at a bigger scale. You get the smaller scale. It's across the board. People have to start looking at technology different.
That's an important message. It's interesting because it's definitely one of the hardest things to communicate well about with anybody, client, internal team, like anything. It's definitely always feels abstract, and I'm nowhere near as experienced as you. But I'll share with you like one thing that I've tried to do more of, and I'll be curious what your thoughts are. So I can install WordPress and like build websites, and I can read code and hack my way through stuff, but I would never call myself a coder. But I'm super technology familiar and like build a little voice over IP company, and like I've done help desk, and like I've been the gamut of like I know how the stuff works and I love it. It's like I'm entertained for the rest of my life with technology, so that's why I'm like into it and have done many different things. Early on, like in my 20s, when I had my help desk and voice over IP company and everything, I did what you just described. You just trust that the technology team or people or developers doing their thing, and then it's going to be done when they say it's done. Of course, it's never done when they say it's going to be done, number one. But then when it is done, it's not what you wanted. And so over time and through like the Lean Startup and other, studying, I can't think of the methodology, Scrum management and like, things like that. And I'm not a Scrum master or anything like that. But I realized like the simplest way to solve that problem, because I can read code and understand what it's doing, but I haven't always been that way. The simplest way to understand it is just force demos all the time.
Yeah.
For me.
Right.
So it's like
ship all the time.
Ship all the time. And you may just be shipping to me for 3 weeks, 3 months or whatever. But then I can see, do you understand what we're trying to do? And can you do it? That's because that's the only two things you need to know about your technical team. Do you understand what we want to do, and can you do it? So, as an example, like a little example, because I have a phenomenal couple of developers on our team, which are brilliant and do a great job for me, and so they kind of cruise along and handle our mainline stuff. But then I always have ideas of stuff I want to do, like typical founder, like, oh, let's try this. So at least I've learned not to just throw that into the mix and screw everything else up. So sometimes I'll go out and like see, oh, maybe I'll test this project with somebody and bring in a new developer, and maybe they'll be here full time. So what I always do is, as early on as like, to get your first milestone payment from me, you have to give me a working understanding of our ultimate goal. And if you can't do that, then it's just not a fit, because either I haven't communicated well or you don't get it. And it could be either side. It's not somebody's fault. It's something happened. Then if they pass there, when I'm working with somebody new, I get demos like 2 or 3 times a week. And it could just be like, this button works now. Like, it literally could be the dumbest thing in the world. But I have like real-time rapid review, and I know enough. I've learned this only because I know that you can go in and you can change the button, it's going to work or it's not. That's not like a monumentous task. And so if you start to break it down to these little micro steps, then even if it's slow, as somebody that can't write code, or even if you're somebody that can't even read code or doesn't understand, you can still see your vision progressing on a daily basis, which is where I feel like it has to get to, instead of, every tech guy knows that there's some things that we get to charge a lot for that take us literally 30 seconds.
Right.
and that's okay. That's the industry. But like, if you're a startup and you're founder and you have to protect every dollar, you don't have any of that luxury. And even when you're, like you said, you're at the big stage. So I'll be curious what you think of it. But I've moved to like forcing super frequent and more aggressive like demo schedules, because then I know if something is happening or not. Yeah.
Well, so you asked my opinion, and I could not agree with you more. It couldn't. And you're basically talking about Eric's book.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And so if anybody's listening or watching this, go read the book.
Yeah. And then read your book.
Yes. because the thing that I'm finding I have to be cautionary about is, yes, everything you just said is 100% required. In no team anywhere am I ever saying, no, let's not ship quickly. Right? I'm like, let's ship really, really fast, weekly, daily, that kind of stuff.
Right.
But what I'm finding now is that the lean methodology, in a weird way, is actually hurting the ecosystem, because it's lulling a lot of founders into thinking, oh, as long as I'm shipping every day, I'm fine.
Because they didn't solve the product piece, probably, right?
Yeah, all three, right? Yeah. Like, you're shipping every day, so you're testing the knobs. You're seeing if the software is doing what you want it to do, but that's the outer layer. You're not looking at the process underneath. So now, you said you have a little bit of a code background, but like you said, you don't have 20 years of CTO. So
right.
What are you making the right architectural choices? And is that you'll take that dev to another dev? Right, that problem is still there.
Right,
and the product piece, to your point, like, is there a cheaper way to do this? That really only comes with like deep entrepreneurial cross-discipline experience, right? Like, if you've launched a bunch of companies and you understand how marketing works and you understand how operations work and you understand how tech works, then you're at a point where you're like, I'll take 88 down to 2, right?
Yeah.
But if you're a new founder or second-time founder, I don't care how product. A lot of founders can be like, "Oh, I'm product focused." I'm like, "No, you're not.
you have no idea.
Market focused. You have seen an opportunity.
Yeah.
And you're going to need people that are way smarter than you are at not building stuff. That's the product piece. And then on the team piece, right? How are you gonna interview an engineer and go, this guy is creating quality code. He's creating code on a performant basis. He's moving us towards Rails because Rails is the right direction for our business and not the technology that he happens to know. Oh, maybe my engineer is kind of a junior leader, and so he doesn't want to work offshore because he doesn't know how to communicate effectively offshore. But in reality, I could save half my money going up. All of the problems are still there on top of absolute must ship daily.
Right. Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, I could think it's great, and it could be the worst piece of crap you could possibly build, and it's not going to be stable for 1,000 users to use it once or whatever.
So to your point, I literally just had a client that wasted $7 million in 5 years doing it what you just said.
Oh my
7 million,
God.
right? Like,
That's not a little mistake. That's a
right?
big mistake. Wow, we. So
Yeah.
I think you get it, and maybe I'm just some things I just take a long time for me to grasp. But I'd love to, if you don't mind, dive a little bit more into product because you talk about like turning the buttons, pushing the button, things work like awesome, yay, that's great, and we know how we're going to advertise, we know we're going to do our Facebook ads. We think we have it all together, but then there's no product there, or it's not a valuable product. So maybe you could give me more stories or explain on that more, because I feel
Sure.
like that's a huge piece of what you're sharing.
Yeah, I'll even kind of reframe it. I think a founder asked me this once. He was interviewing me. He said, "What makes you good at product?" And I didn't. I failed that interview because I was like, I have no idea how to answer that question. So I thought about it, right? And I was like, okay, so someone who's capable of really helping you with product has to be cross-discipline. That
Okay.
was the thing that I really started to understand, because you need to understand who your stakeholders are and what they care about. So from a marketing perspective, they care that things are going to have some clear features that they're going to be able to say, here's the benefit, right? And you're going to have to do some of what I call attribution, being able to show here's the value that I'm creating.
Mm-hmm.
That's piece one. Operationally, you're going to have to make sure that the software you're creating is simple for your staff to use, right? And is going to tie in and integrate with whatever you're going to need to integrate with. That's a larger scale product, but it's there.
Right.
And then most importantly, from an entrepreneurial perspective, it's sales, right? You got to be able to go get the business. And how do you get the business? Well, and get investment dollars? Well, that means customer acquisition and customer retention and customer engagement. So now I'm kind of starting high to low here. I'll go into more detail in a second. But so you can start to see across the board, when you're looking at building anything, all of the stuff that I just said has to be factored in the stuff you're building. It's not like, hey, what's a recent example? Okay, so yesterday I was onboarding a new client, and same example. He came to me. He'd worked with a dev firm. He spent $300,000, $310,000, and he comes to me. He shows me his mobile app, and again, it looks beautiful. And he has been able to raise another $1.5 million because he was able to show customer acquisition. Right? He got one of the metrics. He got like I think he said he had 300 users on the system. And then I asked him the key question. I said, okay, and how many of them are repeat users? Which is what customer engagement and customer retention means. Well, those are two different things, right? So he said, funny you should ask, because he literally just quoted me and said, I'm quoting him, and he said, no one asked that question, right? And I said, he's like, okay, here's the real truth. I've got 300 users, but only 80 of them have ever logged in, and only 12 of them have ever come back, right?
Wow.
And he said to me, when we started to engage, he was like, I'm looking to hire now that I've raised my $1.5 million seed fund, I'm looking to go hire my technical founder who's going to be my lead technical guy. And I'm pushing back on him, and I'm like, you're nowhere. Great job for getting that investment dollar. I mean, literally, I totally believe in him. I think he's got a wonderful opportunity. I think he's going to be successful. But my message is, you're not ready for a technical leader. Yeah. Right? You don't have a product. If your users are not engaging regularly and coming back and creating data that you can be like, oh, okay, well, this is where they're falling off, you have not created value. And so I actually, he's now 300K in, and I have to start him from the beginning and teach him how to your point, ship daily, right? And I'm basically scrapping everything in the whole app, right? I'm like, it's all great, and it looks beautiful, wonderful UX.
They always look beautiful. The failures do.
It's like, I can't iterate that quickly enough, right? Like it's a big jumbled mess now, and I don't know what's working and what's not. So I'm having to strip him all the way back to bare bones. I'm putting a browser inside of his app right? And no one will know that it's a browser, but it's just something I can change the code on the web quickly, and then launch it daily and ship it daily, and then see if, simplify that engagement survey and see if the customers are going to start working with it, and what gets their attention, what doesn't. Then we'll start bringing in all that stuff that he built if we can, right? And that's I hope that kind of illustrates.
That does.
Right. It's one of the situations. And there's just, there's 100 different ones.
There's millions of those, yeah.
It's always different. And that's why you need someone who has launched businesses before, who has a technical mind, right? Somebody who, frankly, there's not a lot of them, but you need to find somebody that will, I don't care if you have to equity, pay them, whatever, but they have to get what it's like to launch a business if you're launching a business. And they have to get what it's like to scale a business if you're scaling the business. Those are different, you need different for different times, and what's another example? I read a book that I recommend to everybody, which is called, how much time do we have left?
We got like 5-10 minutes.
Okay, so I think this will add some value. So there's a book that I recommend everybody reads. To your point, read Eric's book.
Yeah.
Don't think you get it. Then read my book. Then read this book. And this book is called Pitch Anything by Oren Clough.
Excellent book.
Right?
Yes.
So,
phenomenally good book.
Phenomenal book. And mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Right? So a lot of people read this and they read it from a sales perspective or pitching perspective. It's literally called Pitch Anything. And in the book, he goes through several tactics for framing conversations and being able to get your message across, right? Mm-hmm. And that's the majority of the book. But the first part of the book is the part that matters for product. And the first part of the book, he talks about how the human mind evolved. And I don't really care if you think we evolved from monkeys or not. The point is, the brain is layered, right? So there's that reptilian brain, the oldest part of the brain, that it's responsible for responding to threats, right? And so that's the part that it's subconscious. You don't control it. It reacts to whether or not you're hungry. It reacts to whether or not that there's a lion in the weeds. It's why you jump at the movie theater at loud sounds. It's the most powerful atomic part of your brain. Mm-hmm. And what Oren talked about was that one of the things that thing does is it protects you from information overload.
Yep. I remember that part. Yeah.
That was mind-blowing to me because I was like, oh, so from a communication standpoint, if I'm ever going to go in and ask my boss or ask my delegate to go do something, I need to be very clear up front about what my ask is so that they know
if it's safe.
Exactly. They need to feel safe that I'm talking about what I'm talking to them about, that I'm not going to talk to them for hours. Actually, just a quick aside, because it's just I'm passionate about this. So within engineering, this is also one of the main reasons why non-technical founders find it so difficult to talk to technical people. Right? That's a common complaint of why are they so hard to talk to? Engineers in particular tend to be really bad at this particular thing. Because their job is to solve complex problems, and the only way they know how to communicate is to come up to you and go, "Here's all my problem,"
and you're just shut down before they're even done talking.
100% shut down, right? So that's an aside, but let's bring it back. You can train your engineer. The point there is you can train your engineers and every technologist on your staff and every non-technologist on your staff to be way more effective in meetings if you show them this book, and then you take them through the process of and there's some blog articles on my site. Take them through the process of naming their problem and their solution and why you are supposed to care about this up front, so that then you or whoever they're talking to can basically anchor on all of the other stuff that they're giving and saying, okay, well, this relates or it doesn't relate, right?
Yeah.
That's the side. Let's go back to product. So users are your most finicky boss, right? Yeah. So when it comes to product design, you have to get your value proposition over the line immediately, right? You can't create. Lots of people like to design apps that have these long tutorials or they have all these different features, and they just throw users in and expect them to use them. And I'm like, That's never going to happen,
Yeah, no
right?
kidding.
That person looks at that app or looks at that website and says, "This is too complex, and I'm out." Right? So that happens over and over and over and over. If there's one product psychology concept, it's that. So it's like this is what makes someone good at product. It's not did they learn how to wireframe. You can go to GA and learn how to wireframe.
Right.
Right? You can go to Codera and learn how to wireframe.
Right.
It's not, is the button supposed to be an accordion button, or what's the hottest UI that Apple came up with?
Right.
That doesn't make or break your product. What makes or break your product is does it create value immediately for users? Does it keep them engaged? Does it build habit? Does it use habit forming theory to make sure that users are being rewarded for their actions, that they're seeing progress and they're seeing that their investments are paying off? And does it at every level, does it make the user's experience more comfortable, right? And then 15 dozen other things, but that's what product means. And how do you make a good product? But then truly, what is the mark of a great product person? How do I build all of that for not building it at all?
Yeah.
Welcome to life. It's not like Facebook, right? Everyone goes like, oh man, like back in 1998, Zuckerberg just came in there and he just created a site and then he had $1 billion company. And it's like,
not really.
2017 is not 1998. We are literally 20 years past that point.
Right.
This is a complicated process. Technology is part of every single business, and you guys, everybody has to look at this and go, I got to take this serious. Like this is going to be my most expensive aspect of my business for most founders, right? So it's
amazing, man. That's phenomenal. Thank you. I've never had anybody explain it that way to me, and that is eye-opening. And I've thought, I've been in the business for a few years. You think this would be more common, but it's definitely not.
Right.
And I think the complexity and speed of technology advancement makes it difficult for anybody. It doesn't, because it's like what we were talking about 3 or 4 years ago. Today we have to deal with AI. It's like, that's just one single little teeny baby thing of like how technology evolves. It's just like out of control all the time. But
to your point, it applies to technical leaders, right? Like as a CTO, you're going to have to start to specialize, or a VP, you're going to have to start to specialize. What are you good at? And you're always going to have things that you're not good at, right? And so then that means you're going to need other people to help you inspect your own team. Yeah. I don't care if you're an alpha nerd.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
You're deluding yourself if you don't think somebody else needs to help you see what you can't see.
Yeah. And I'll add one other book recommendation in about the brain functionality. It's called The Big Leap. It's not something that you would think of in technical circles, but it talks about the brain function just like it does in Pitch Anything.
Uh-huh.
And the other really interesting thing inside of it, and it's a little bit out there for me, but it was a really good read, is that he studied all these people and he found that anytime they had huge success, their discomfort with success was actually triggering that fear, trigger that happens in our brain. And
I've heard of this.
So that's why they self-sabotage. And until you identify that bad brain pattern, just like we talked about with like engineers dump all this crap, on your desk and you don't even know how to respond because your brain shut down. It's a similar thing that happens. It's something I'd recommend everybody read too. It's a little
bit. What is that called again?
It's called The Big Leap. And it's got like a goldfish bowl on the cover. But I'll shoot it to you and I'll link it to it in the show notes here. But I think you'll like you should check it out because it's the same kind of thing. Like it's just the way our brains work, and if we're not consciously aware of it and we don't work to repattern our subconscious and our conscious, then just like we can't communicate well in the meeting because we got dumped on with information, the same kind of thing can happen when we have success. We may have some bad tracks playing or bad patterning in our brain, and then we sabotage ourselves somewhere else. So it's similar stream. So, but wow, that's amazing, Jay. This has been really, really cool. So do you have when's the book coming out, or do you have a title yet? I know you're in the process of working on it.
It's available.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, it's available. It's on my site right now, just for free. I'm doing it MVP style. I'm doing it the way I preach, right? So awesome. I wrote it a bunch of times, and I was like, okay, it's good enough for me to just get out there. and it's available. And I think right now on my site I called it like the ultimate guide to building software fast and cheap or something like that.
Awesome.
And the title I'm anticipating actually launching with in probably like 3 months is the minimum viable team. So,
cool.
Right. As
yeah,
kind of,
there you go. That'd be perfect.
So I got the domain, I got all that, so it'll be coming out, and then I'm going to be just basically doing this as much as possible publicly for the next 3 to 6 months. So
terrific. Well, we'll let me know when it comes out. We'll have you back on, and you can share some more insight. This is super valuable. So thank you so much for being on today.
Yep. Oh, and I didn't give you the domain. So my site is jaycrouch.com. JAYCROUCH. The guide's there if you want to reach me. I'm there. It's all there.
Perfect. Yeah, and I'll link to that in all the show notes, and we got your contact email there, and we'll share that as well. And man, just super valuable, amazing stuff, Jay. So thank you so much.
Thanks for giving me a platform to shout. You know, as you can tell, I get a little passionate about this.
I love it. That's why I just like going into these kind of unstructured and seeing where it's going to take us, because I feel like that's where the value comes from. So thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Absolutely.
You've been listening to Today's Business Leaders with Gabe Arnold. Remember to subscribe on iTunes. For more information, visit todaysbusinessleaders.com.